What is Dragon Ball Heroes? Well, depending on who you ask, you'll get varying answers. A Nintendo game about Dragon Ball characters entering the real world, an arcade game meant to gamble your life away, or a manga and anime that has some of the most insane lore of the franchise. Well, here's the truth. Dragon Ball Heroes is an arcade game developed by Dimps, the same people who made the Budokai games and Xenoverse. That explains why most of the models were recycled from that game until recently, and why the lore has similarities to the Xenoverse games. The difference being is that you'd use those cards in the arcade cabinet to fight in certain missions, kind of like using an amiibo for Smash Brothers. For a good chunk of Heroes' lifespan, that's all it was. There wasn't really a story mode to engage in, just missions that would contain specific events that would either cover a moment in the franchise or be a what-if event. But wait, if there's no story mode, then who are these kids that keep showing up in the commercials? Well, those characters are the avatars, who played the arcade game. While we never see them in the main Heroes continuity, they are the main focus of the Nintendo games, and the Victory Mission Manga. The 3DS game covers Beat, the main avatar, being selected to the game and having to fight Demigirl, who's threatening to take over Beat's world. The Switch game has Beat and Note being recruited by Xeno Trunks to join the Time Patrol and stop Silas, the original Time Patroller. Unlike the 3DS game, the arcade game is actually used as a method of time travel, and Beat's world takes place in the far future of Dragon Ball. The Victory Mission is about Beat and all the other avatars originally just playing the game itself, just like anyone normally would. But then it becomes a mission to stop all the Shadow Dragons. Oh, and there's also Avatars, which as far as I can tell is just about playing the arcade game, taking a more meta view of Heroes compared to everything else. Okay, but if the stuff with Beat and the other avatars isn't the main story mode of Heroes, then what is? Is it the anime that has the two different Gokus? Well, technically yes, the main story mode is in the arcade game. The story properly starts with God Mission, which is the fourth mission of Heroes. Think of the missions like a season in a game or show. It starts with Future Trunks after the Cell arc fighting Toa and Mira, but eventually gets crazier. Like, there's an alternate version of every main character in Dragon Ball called Xeno characters, who help the Supreme Kai of Time to form the Time Patrol. While this might seem like the same continuity as the Xenoverse games, it isn't. For one thing, the Time Patrol in Xenoverse has a bunch of custom characters, and the only Xeno character it has is Trunks, compared to Heroes, which has a Xeno version of every main Saiyan, but not a single custom character. Anyway, it later goes on to include the version of Goku and Vegeta that we see after the Tournament of Power, and potentially after the Broly movie, giving them brand new forms and villains to fight. If someone mentions Dragon Ball Heroes, they're probably talking about this version, as opposed to the other versions I talked about in this video. The game's story mode would get adapted into manga and anime form that follow the events of the game. However, they would remove a notable amount of stuff as well as add in their own kind of things. For the sake of this video that you're watching right now, just treat them like the differences between the DBS anime and manga. But in future ones, unless stated otherwise, I'll just treat them as the same continuity. I'll be covering the events of the game's story in the next few videos, starting with God Mission. But for the sake of clarity and to get more people to click on these videos, I'll be referring to these missions as arcs from now on. The first one being the Demigirl arc. This arc was only ever covered in one chapter in the manga and wasn't even shown in the anime at all, which is a bit strange when you think about it because it's literally the start of the story. Skipping it is kind of detrimental to someone's experience. It makes more sense though when you realize that these are entirely meant to be promotional and they were coming out when the next missions were also coming out, so they probably just wanted to focus on those instead. That being said, if you want an actual good way of experiencing the story without having some guy regurgitating it to you, I'd highly recommend the manga. Even though it skips the first few arcs, it does it seamlessly and is actually a story unlike the anime, which works more as a companion piece and is less as its own individual thing. With all that out of the way, I think it's important to talk about how I plan on discussing Heroes going forward. I plan on using bits and pieces from the manga and anime to help on expand on or cover things that the game never did. While this might seem a bit weird at first, trust me, it's very needed. In the game itself, we never get properly introduced to the Time Patrol or Time Breakers, but in the manga we do. But in the cases where the manga and anime contradict what the arcade game does, I'll just go with the game's version instead. Like how Vegeta never uses the Kaioken in the game, but he does in the manga and anime. The reason I'm making a separate video about this instead of just throwing it at the beginning of the Demigirl arc video is because I think this works as its own standalone video. And it would be a bit jarring for me to talk how I am now to going into narrator mode. Plus I do plan on talking about the other heroes' continuities. For now though, we'll be focusing on the main continuity. Next up will be the Demigirl arc. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss that one. Bye.